Hello and welcome and hello. This is Creatively Torn, a channel where I mostly talk about books, but sometimes don't. This is my traditional monthly wrap-up. So in this video, I'm going to go over the books that I read in February and talk about the books that I'm going to read in March. New to this segment is going to be a book of the month, which I meant to do last month, but I didn't do. Well, we'll be doing that going forward. So I'll be starting with that one, assuming I don't forget again. Aside from that, that's all I've got going today, so let's just go ahead and dive in to the books that I read last month. It was a very productive month in February, actually. I read technically 8 books. Some of them are very short. One was actually a short story, so I don't count that entirely, so it's more like 7. But it's still a very productive month, I'd say. I had some really good books that I read. So starting things off right away in February, I read The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. This was a monthly classic for a read-along. This was a book that I may have read in junior high, but probably didn't read. I know we were supposed to read it at one point for English class. I feel like I just read the first couple of pages and I stopped, because I didn't care at all back then. And the other H.G. Wells book that I read during that time period, I could not stand at all, so I'm assuming I just kind of gave up on this one. But when I read it this past time, I really liked it. Thought it was pretty good. It was a lot more allegorical and had more social commentary than I was expecting. I wasn't really expecting anything, to be honest. I just knew it was a story about a guy in a time machine that goes in the future. So I was pleasantly surprised with that book. It's fairly well written, not very hard to read, nice pacing, has some interesting ideas about the future as well. So overall, I think that was a fairly good story. I gave it 4 stars out of 5. Next up was the book that I was in the middle of during my last monthly wrap-up. That was the first book of Mistborn Era 1 by Brandon Sanderson. That would be The Final Empire. So when I mentioned that in the last video, I was in the middle of it, and I said I was going to mix on it, I think. I think that kind of stayed till the end. I did like the story. The writing was not my favorite. The characters were not my favorites. But I did enjoy the story overall, the plot, and the magic system. And I did go ahead and keep going with that series. So as for the first one, it's okay. I think I gave it between a 3.5 and a 4. Maybe even the rare 3.75, I don't know. It's hard to say exactly. Like I said, I do like the plot and kind of the world to some extent, but the characters were not my favorites in the first book. Writing was not my favorite. It was very basic, but I did enjoy the magic system in place. I thought that was very interesting. So overall, it's an okay story. Not one of my favorites, but good enough to keep me going with the series. Alright, the next book. The next book was The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum. This was one I did not have on my initial February TBR. But during the past month, I got a free Amazon Prime trial. And with that was included the Amazon Prime reading, which includes some ebooks, which is different from Prime Unlimited. For some reason, I don't know what the deal is there. But I did go through that list of books. Part of it, I didn't go the whole thing. It was kind of hard to organize all of them. But I did go through some of the books that were in the Prime reading list, and one of the books was The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum, which was one that I wanted to read for a while, and one that I don't own, and one that my library does not carry. So I decided to give that one a read before I run out of my free trial. So I read that next. That's a very good book. That's a very disturbing book. If you don't know what it's about, it is about it's about a teenage girl who gets imprisoned and tortured by the family she's sent to live with. That's based on true events of a girl that that happened to back in the 50s, I believe. So this is not the same story, but it's based on those events with entirely fictional characters and a different setting and things like that. And so, as you can imagine, it's a very disturbing book. Yeah, it's very, very sickening. One that I would not recommend to a lot of people, as it is very in-depth in the events that happen. Though it's not overly gory or anything, but it's still very disturbing nonetheless. But it's also a very good book. I think it's also really well written. The way he slowly lowers you into this place where you are witnessing this horrible event, but you just can't seem to look away. Really puts you into the viewpoint of one of the main characters in the story as he witnesses these events. So it's a very well written, very well constructed story. One that I flew through in a couple of days. But yeah, obviously not one that everyone is going to want to read. And if you do think you want to try it, I would definitely look up the trigger warnings beforehand if you are at all bothered by any of those things, because there are a whole lot of them in the story. So anyways, The Girl Next Door was very good. I rated it a 4.5 out of 5. I just couldn't give it a 5 out of 5 for some reason. But it was very good. Very well-written book. As Sega comes to destroy my camera stand. Alright, the next book that I read was Dune by Frank Herbert. This was one of the big sci-fi books that I had on my list of books, I'll link it here maybe, or up here, that I wanted to read, and so I had the opportunity to read Dune with a read-along in February, and I'm glad I did that, because this is another very good book. Obviously it's one of the great classic sci-fi books of all time, and a very influential book in terms of pop culture and literature ever since it was written. I had a really good time with it. I really enjoyed the writing style. I did this one immersively, so I read the physical book, which I ended up buying a deluxe edition of, which I think is up above me right now somewhere. I also listened to the audiobook at the same time for most of the duration of the book. That was a really good, interesting experience too. It was a very atmospheric audiobook, I would say. Had some more things to it, like there's no like defined chapter numbers in the book, and so the audiobook would kind of just go for a half an hour and then stop at some random place in the middle of a chapter. I don't know why, but that's kind of annoying to keep track of. Other than that, it was a really good audiobook, and it was a really good experience doing that immersively. So yeah, Dune was a really good book. 5 stars. I'm not quite sure how much I enjoy this yet. Still kind of letting it marinate. But it's very good, very well written. I don't really have any flaws, I don't think, that I would mention. I did end up watching the new movie of Dune as well after I finished the book, which is also very well done. So if you haven't seen that yet, I would go ahead and recommend that. Okay, so the next one up was Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. This is one of the cornerstone dystopian classics, one of the few I hadn't read yet. And to be honest, I think this one is the weakest of the ones that I have read, which would include 1984 and Fahrenheit 451. I think that's all. Yeah, and then this one. I did not enjoy this very much at all. I did enjoy the world that's set up. It's kind of a futuristic world that's based on science, where science rules all. Where humans are cloned and they're kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Placated? Maybe. Kept in line by drugs. And the overall living experience is kind of hampered and is kind of tempered because of these drugs, and so it's a very unique world. The book was rather satirical, which I did enjoy that part kind of. I just haven't really gotten into these satirical kinds of books yet. Something about the writing style just does not work for me. So I think the ideas were good. The story, the plot, and the characters were all very bad. They were basically non-existent, which made it really hard to get through. So aside from like a few chapters near the end, it was a whole lot of nothing in this book. So that makes it kind of hard to recommend. I do think people should be exposed to these ideas just to guard themselves against this kind of thing that wouldn't happen in real life. But it's not so hard to recommend because it's just not a very easy book to read. I don't think most people these days would enjoy it. Really anticipate on reading Brave New World ever again. I gave it 3 stars out of 5, which may be generous to be honest. Again, the ideas were good, were there just wasn't a good execution of them. I think this might be a good book that could be adapted into a really good movie. I know there have been some miniseries and movies that have been adapted. I've not seen any of them. I've not really heard about any of them, so I'm not sure if any of them are good or not. But as for the book, it's, very, very average at best. Next up was another book I had not intended to read, but I saw this again on the list of the Amazon Prime reading. I didn't actually read it there because I ended up downloading it for free because it's in the public domain, so I could have read it anytime, but once I got my eye on it, I kind of wanted to read it. This is an older book. This is The Beautiful and the Damned by F. Scott Fitzgerald. This is my second book by F. Scott Fitzgerald. The first one being The Great Gatsby, his most popular one, which I didn't love, to be honest. I kind of feel the same way about this one. It's quite a bit different than The Great Gatsby in terms of my criticisms. I feel like The Great Gatsby was very brief, and the characters were very shallow and undefined and undeveloped, and the ideas were not really there. But the story was okay, the setting was great, the prose was okay. Whereas The Beautiful and the Damned is kind of the opposite. I think the characters are very well done. I got a good sense of the main characters at least. I think the setting was okay. It's nothing too special. So the story was kind of mediocre. It's a very long book, so it's overly long, whereas the other one was overly short. The plot was very basic. It didn't need to be as long as it was. I think it should have been trimmed down by a lot. There's just a lot of meandering about when they didn't need to be. The prose was good, I think, for the most part. There are some really good lines in here. Most of them were not really related to anything that was going on in the story, but they were good nonetheless. And like I said, the characters were good. Some of the ideas were okay. They just needed to be trimmed down a lot. So anyways, this was just an overly long book. Again, another 3-star read for me for Fitzgerald. So that was The Beautiful and the Damned. So the next thing that I finished was a short story. This was The Lottery by Shirley Jackson. This is one of the more popular short stories ever written. A lot of people claim it's the best. I wouldn't go that far. I thought it was okay. It was very short, very concise, but it had a clear message that it was trying to get across. It really reminded me of a Twilight Zone episode, which is, I'm guessing this story was one of the things that the Twilight Zone took inspiration from. It was okay. It was a good little story. It wasn't very long. I don't think it was anything too exceptional. The writing was okay. The message I've seen and done in different places since then, so it didn't really have much of an impact on me. But if you do get a chance to read it, I would recommend it. It's not going to take you very long at all. So I ended up giving that one a 4 out of 5 for a short story. And then the last book that I finished in February was The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This is a book that I've been wanting to read for a while, a movie that I have seen before, an author that I've been wanting to get to. So I finally read The Road. Very much enjoyed it. It's a very bleak and basic story. It's also very short, about a father and son during the apocalypse, or the post-apocalypse, what have you. So it's just your basic survival story. But it's done very well, I think. The writing style is very unique for all of McCarthy's work. I think it works really well here. It raises some really interesting philosophical questions, mostly about survival in this empty world and things like that. As it is, this is a very good book. I'm kind of hovering between a 4 and a 5 on this one, as I just finished reading it in the past couple of days. So for now, I'm just sitting on a 4.5 out of 5. Very good book. I do recommend reading it. It is kind of harsh, but you know, it's a book. That's what books are for. Yeah, again, it's very short, so it doesn't take very long to read. I think it's a good entry point into the work of Cormac McCarthy, so I'm looking forward to reading more from him in the future. So, all that out of the way, it's time for me to do the inaugural book of the month for February. And really, it's down to 3 books for this month. It'd be between The Girl Next Door, Dune, and The Road. It's really a tight race here. I'm gonna say it's not The Girl Next Door just because it's much too disturbing to be celebrated. So between the Dune and The Road, it's really hard to say. I think Dune is the more complete novel, more influential novel, more original novel. But I felt more during The Road than I did during Dune. I related more to the characters in The Road than in Dune. I think I'm gonna have to go with The Road for this one. As much as I did like Dune, I think The Road is just one that I connected to more in terms of plot and the themes and the overall tone of the story and the characters. I think it's one that I had more of an experience reading than I did with Dune. So, go ahead and say the book of the month is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. The only book that I'm currently in the middle of reading is book 2 of Mistborn, The Well of Ascension, by Sanderson, obviously. This is the second book in the Mistborn trilogy. I feel kind of the same way as I did about the first one. It's probably not going to be my favorite book of all time, but I do quite enjoy it. I think I'm enjoying this one more than I did the first one so far. The writing style is a little more matured in this one so far. The plotting and the pacing, I think, are better in this one than the first one. The first one was just a little too fast-paced for my taste, whereas this one, they're really setting up a lot of different things throughout the story. I'm not that far into it, to be honest. I'm less than halfway through it, but I'm quite enjoying it for what it is, adding a lot more intrigue to the story, which I would not have expected after the way the first one finished. But it's going to be a wild ride, I've been told, so I'm looking forward to getting to the end of this one, and then we'll be reading the third book very soon. So speaking of to be read, let's go ahead and go into the next section, which is my TBR for the month of March. The first one that I will be reading is Isabin by John Steinbeck. This is one of the American classics I've been most looking forward to reading for a while now. It's finally time to get into it. I know it's about some families in California. Kind of a generational drama, I think. Beyond that, I don't know too much. But I am really looking forward to getting into it. So that'll be my first one that I start very soon. Probably before I finish up Mistborn, I'll be starting that one. After that will be another sci-fi book. This will be a series, one that I will be trying to get into. This is the Red Rising series by Pierce Brown. This is another one of these sci-fi books that I wanted to get to in my recent video that I made. So I have the first book of the series, hardcover, in hardcover. Yeah, that's how you speak. So I do own the first book. I'll be getting to that very soon. There is a read-along happening right now that I've been tempted to join. They're starting on the third book in March. So if I can catch up on books 1 and 2, and then get into book 3, I can join that read along. We'll see. If I like it that much, I will try to do that. If it's kind of lukewarm with me, I will probably just hold off and go at my own pace for that. So we'll see how that goes. Next up would be The October Country by Ray Bradbury. It's been a few months since I read anything from Ray Bradbury, so it's time to get into another one of his books. This is one I bought a few months ago, so time to break it open, I think. Next up is not a specific book necessarily. This is just going to be my slot for a Stephen King book. I haven't decided which one yet. It will likely not be The Stand, just because I just got done reading a post-apocalypse book. So I'd like to wait until I start on another one. Even though I did just end up buying a copy of The Stand recently, it would be very tempting to go ahead and start there, but I'm going to wait on that one and just check out something from the library. Like I said, I don't know which one yet. I'm just going to go there and pick one at random when I go. See what I can find. Then after that will be the third book in Mistborn Era 1, The Hero of Ages. So I will likely be finishing this trilogy in next month. I already talked about the series a little bit, so I'm not going to say too much. But the third book apparently seems to wrap everything up very nicely. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. We'll likely not be going forward with Era 2 in the immediate future, if ever. I do want to read Stormlight Archive at some point, and maybe Warbreaker, as that one's a standalone for the time being. But it's going to be a while before I start either of those. We got a few other fantasy authors and series I want to get to first this year. And then the last book that I may get to, or maybe we'll wait until April, will be another classic. This would be Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. This is another one that I've been wanting to read for a while. I believe this is a coming-of-age story. I haven't looked into it too much. I don't know really what it's about. But I do want to get into the big three from Dickens this year, hopefully. That'd be Great Expectations, A Tale of Two Cities, and David Copperfield. And if I like those, I might get into a few more. I've read 2 from him so far. That would be Oliver Twist and A Christmas Carol. Neither of those are my favorite, so I'd like to see how I do with these other ones that he's more well known for. Starting with Great Expectations, likely at the end of March, maybe in April. If I do finish all of those, and then there's time left in the month, I will be reading Wuthering Heights. Yeah, another classic, one that I was intending to read in October, but there is a read-along happening this month for that one. So if I do get a chance to add that one to my schedule for March, I will do that. But it probably won't happen. It's probably going to wait until October, just because I know there's a good number of books on my list here already. Some of them are quite long. So it's very likely that this will not be happening until October. But just in case there is time, that would be one that I might get to. And if somehow I get through all those, and I would continue on with Red Rising 2 and 3, or maybe if I like the first one a whole lot, I will jump these 2 up above some other things and get to those first. So it's all kind of nebulous at this point. It kind of depends on my reactions to the first one. So it goes. Anyways, that is my TBR MBR list for March of 2023. Looking forward to a lot of the books on this list. Some of these I've been wanting to read for a while. So it should be a fun month. So anyways, that's all I've got. As always, if you do want to connect with me at some point for some reason, you can always add me on Goodreads or Storygraph, or follow me on Instagram, where I occasionally post things, or you can go ahead and subscribe to my channel, where I post these long videos every month. That being said, that's all I got for today. So thank you for watching, and is what am I talking about? Where am I? The month. La. Yeah. Sega doesn't like it. She is bitching about the whole thing right now. That's all, folks.